Of course, for you grads, the future is a dark chasm of yawning uncertainty. But don't worry. You don't have to face the future for like 2 hours.
That is the future CBS Late Show host Stephen Colbert, who was one of many notables to deliver graduation speeches this spring. But we have another speech to college students to tell you about by George Saunders, the short story writer. Here's Mo Rocca.
Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you. I'm Robert. Robert, nice to meet you. How are you?
He might be the most celebrated short story writer of his generation.
Please join me now to welcome Professor George Saunders.
But when George Saunders was asked to address graduates at Syracuse University, he was stumped.
I thought, why am I giving this speech to a bunch of kids who are better educated than I was, have already made better choices than I did at that age? What do I have? And what I had was basically time. I'd had all these years of living.
What I regret most in my life are failures of kindness. Those moments when another human being was right there in front of me, suffering, and I responded sensibly, reservedly, mildly.
The message Saunders finally came up with was disarmingly simple.
It's a little facile maybe and certainly hard to implement, but I'd say as a goal in life, you could do worse than try to be kinder.
In the speech, you said, your life is going to be a gradual process of becoming kinder and more loving. It's a pretty optimistic assumption.
Yeah. I had in an early draft, I had a line, unless it's not, and you're going to be a bitter old fart someday, which is totally possible. But I thought for that day, I would leave that out.
The speech turned into a bestseller for Saunders.
So when I'm working on a story, I'll usually just have some events at first.
But it's in fiction that he's really made his mark. George Saunders knows what makes for a good story.
There's a person here and a person there. This one is thinking, I'm having a great day, I'm so happy. This one is thinking, I never got what I deserved. You put even the slightest contact between them, that's going to cause sparks.
In winter, Saunders brought us to a snowy field in Syracuse, New York. This place was the setting for the title story of his collection, 10th of December. In that story, a little boy crosses paths with a man who has decided to kill himself. Cars parked here. An old man dying comes out here.
Right. He has this vision that he'll go up there somewhere and sit very peacefully and just ease his way out. And then the little boy, Robin, is just out goofing around. He's got this kind of vivid fantasy life.
But when the little boy falls into an icy pond, the man switches from thoughts of suicide to a desperate attempt to save the boy's life.
He had to get the kid warmed up. How to do it? Hug him, lie on top of him. That would be like popsicle on popsicle.
Our congratulations to George Saunders, this year's Story Prize winner.
George Saunders' stories have made him a critical favorite. They're dark, funny, and compassionate. And like the story of Saunders' own life, they take surprising twists and turns. You came to writing pretty late.
Yeah.
Finishing high school, Saunders seemed least likely to become a famous writer.
I didn't really think college was in my future. So then my plan was, I knew a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy in the Eagles. And this guy said, I think we can be the opening act for the opening act. Okay, that'd be cool.
When that didn't pan out, he ended up at, of all places, the Colorado School of Mines, then got a job scouting for natural resources in the jungles of Indonesia. But deep down, he wanted to be a writer. And he figured if he mined his travels for material, well, that would surely make him the next Hemingway.
It's kind of a beginner error. Is the reason I'm no good as a writer is because I haven't done anything yet. I haven't lived anything really cool. So then that was a great education to go there and have a lot of amazing experiences and typing it up and going, ooh, that's not actually a story. It's just some typing.
He came back to the U.S. Now married and with 2 young daughters to support, he had to make a living. So he got a job as a writer of technical reports. It was an office park.
It was an office park.
Not in Tibet or in the jungles of Africa. It was in Rochester.
It was Corporate Woods, it was called, actually, yeah.
It was really called Corporate Woods.
It was.
He tried his best to write fiction during breaks. Around this time, you end up writing the great American novel.
Yeah.
Well, not exactly.
They had this 700-page manuscript that was titled La Boda de Eduardo, which I think means like Ed's wedding. Yeah. Finally gave it to my wife, and I was so happy. I thought, I can't believe I accomplished this. So she took it to read, and I kind of, peeked around the corner, and she must have been maybe on page 3, and she just was sitting there with her head in her hands, and it's just unintelligible.
But he'd been doing another kind of writing back at the office park when he was bored. One night, his wife stumbled on that work.
I was just writing these little poems, these kind of like almost Dr. Seuss kind of limericks. Brought it home that night and threw it on the table and went off to do something with the kids. And I heard Paula laughing. I mean, really genuinely laughing. I hadn't had anyone read something I'd written with genuine pleasure in about 6 years. And I thought, dummy, that's what it is.
He'd found his voice.
And it was just like a little light went on that this is the life that we're living right now. This is the life that most Americans my age were living. So if you can't find something to say about it, and if you can't find a way to bring the kind of deep human stuff to it, that's not the world's fault. It's your fault.
Loving the book. Thank you so much.
Finally, at the age of 37, Saunders published his first collection of short stories. He's won increasing acclaim with each book and essay.
Could such a person exist?
The guy who barely got into college now teaches writing to university students. Hundreds of Syracuse graduate students compete to get into his small class.
Is it pretty invigorating to be on a campus around all these young people?
Yeah, it really is. It is. It's a little nerve-wracking, because you can't really, with this level of student, you can never phone it in.
But for all his success, George Saunders still finds a lot to fret over. Like every time he looks at his latest story.
If I look at a 10-page thing that I've written, I always have a feeling kind of like, I don't know, who wants to read 10 pages of you? Can you get it in 7? They might be able to tolerate.